Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, finance and accounting pros prepare for change and transformation. Today, we're going to be talking about how to elevate and accelerate your leadership journey. Joining me is a good friend who I've known for quite a bit, and I'm a fan of his books, multiple books, Emmanuel Gobillot. So Emmanuel, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Tom, for having me with you today.
So I actually got to catch up with Emmanuel a few weeks back in London, but now we've got him live on the show. And he's described as the first leadership guru for the digital generation since his first book, The Connected Leader, How to Create Agile Organizations for People and Performance, which I understand will have a second edition coming out later this year.
That is true. That is true.
He's been a friend and mentor since we met at the Digital Now conference in 2010, one of my favorite conferences, after release of his second book, Leader Shift, Reinventing Leadership for the Age of Mass Collaboration. By the way, you're going to have plenty of summer reading from this conversation here. He's the author of 7 leadership books, including The Connected Leader, Leader Shift, Follow the Leader, Disciplined Collaboration, Unleash Your Leader, Respond, Recover, and Reimagine. And his latest book, This Is Not a Leadership Book, 20 Rules for Success. He consults and speaks on leadership around the globe, helping leaders and their teams realize there's a better way to lead. Emmanuel, say hello to our audience.
Hello, hello, hello. No, again, thank you so much, Tommy. It's always a delight to catch up and always enriching for me to speak to you. So I'm really looking forward to this.
And I love this new book. So I'm a fan of a number of your books, but I want to talk about this one. This is not a leadership book, 20 Rules for Success. Those who haven't read it, or get it on your give us a short summary of this book. What's it covering here, Emmanuel, and why is it not a leadership book?
Okay, so let me get back to the beginning. So there's a famous picture by René Matisse, the Belgian surreal painter, and it's got a pipe on it. It's a picture of a pipe, and it says, "This is not a pipe." Ceci n'est pas une pipe in French. And I always thought about it as a wonderful piece of art and somewhat ironic and so on, until I realized the title of the piece is actually The Treachery of Images. And the point that Matisse was trying to make was, or Magritte rather was trying to make was, you can look at it, it looks like a pipe, it looks like the image of a pipe, but it's not a pipe. You can't touch it, you can't smoke it, you can't feel it, you can't do anything with it. It's a representation. And it occurred to me that actually Magritte had a point which was far broader than just images, that actually leadership books and business books in general are fairly similar. And if I think about business books, I think they fall roughly, they have three things that are wrong with them. The first one is they tend to be relatively shallow, so they deal with one thing, so emotional intelligence or command and control, whatever it might be. And often you have to read a lot of them in order to make sense of the full breadth of skills you need. So there's that kind of shallowness. They also tend to be fairly narrow, so they'll deal with leadership outside of the context. And then you have to do the application. So you have to work hard to think, okay, how many of them do I need and how relevant are they to me? And then the final treachery of books on leadership is they tend to all be biased. So most of them are either about leadership as it ought to be, leadership as it should be, or leadership as it was for me if it's written by an ex-leader. But then you have to do the work and say, well, what's the reality of leadership as it is for me? So what I was trying to do with This Is Not a Leadership Book was to think, okay, how do we write a book that is relevant for leaders, that is real, that is truthful, and that is about the experience of leading, how it feels to be a leader, and how can we be successful at it? So what we tried to do was, instead of researching the whole gamut of leadership here, was to think, okay, you can play the game however you want. You can be the leader you ought to be, because actually the best leaders are themselves rather than a poor copy of somebody else. But what are the rules of engagement? What do you need to know so that you know that however you decide to lead, here are the rules, here are the pitfalls. So whatever you do, you can look at the book and think, okay, what's leadership about? What are the fundamental rules of leadership? How does it show itself? What are some of the the fundamental rules and the fundamental truth of leadership in terms of how it exhibits itself? Why do we have leaders anyway? What kind of a leader am I going to be? So what we tried to do was really to research that book and write about the 20 rules that will make you successful in your real context, whomever you are, whatever skills you bring, and you can then learn to put it all together to think, how do I compensate for what I haven't got? How do I work? So I like to think about the book as a kind of leadership development program in a book, which is kind of something you can dip in and out and something you can look at, and hopefully it's a good read.
It is. Quite frankly, it's very good. I read it on my trip back across from London back here. So
all right.
I love it. It's been
so it's what my publisher. Where were you flying to from London? Were you flying?
Baltimore, back to Baltimore, home.
Okay, so it's a London to Baltimore read.
Yeah.
Okay. My very first publisher, tended to classify books as airplane routes. So you had the London to Amsterdam, which you're really easy, half an hour dip in and out, and then you had your long, London to Shanghai or something. These were, or even Australia. These were the long reads. But I'm okay. I'm okay. To London to Baltimore sounds fair.
So, all right, now you were recognized as the first leadership guru for the digital generation, and that's obviously when we met.
Yeah.
The Association Digital Now conference. So tell me what's about leadership in this digital age, and how's it changing in light of the exponential changes brought about by ChatGPT and generative AI?
Okay, that's a big topic. Let me try to put it this way. So that I like to talk about working in the business, on the business, and out of the business. And what I mean by that is I think of leaders as having three fundamental perspectives in the business, which is the stuff they have to do and about delivery of their own objective. On the business, make the organization better, processes, capability, that sort of thing. And then out of the business, which is anticipating what's yet to come. And when I think about digital, I think so the first wave, let's call it that, of digitalization was really about in the business. So how do we become more efficient? How do we become better at what we do? With some on the business, how do we become more effective? Can we rethink some of our, supply chain arrangements, service interfaces, ways of working? And I think the challenge here of digital was really, how do we deliver on the promise? So if the promise is we're going to be more efficient and we're going to be more effective, how do we deliver that? And the challenge for leaders was to look objectively and say, actually, if we look at productivity, certainly in Europe, but also globally, look at the productivity figures, look at the promise of technology. Have we ever delivered anything? Not really. I mean, we tend to promise somewhat up here and we deliver somewhat down here. So the challenge was really around, how do I make sure this happens? I think the question about AI is different. I think the question about AI generally and AI in all of its different forms, I think the challenge becomes an out of the business challenge. And by out of the business, what I mean is just a fundamental disruption. It is about, the broader lessons that we can learn from adjacent fields. Now, the problem is, I think AI is challenging a lot of what we do in ways we hadn't expected. And I think, some of the challenges are, they're moral, they're philosophical, they're psychological, they're ethical, they're political, they're environmental. So you've got a whole heap of challenges suddenly thrown into the pan, which normally, as leaders, we leave for somebody else to deal with. So it's regulation and politics, and we don't touch that. We may influence it, we try to influence it, we lobby for it, we have views, but it's not our domain. Now, I think what is different about AI is it becomes our domain because we're bringing the challenges inside the organization. The out is coming in a way. Yeah. And so the challenge, I think, is twofold. One is the benefits in and on are so huge that actually we're more likely to pay attention to that than what's going on sideways about the ethics, the moral, the philosophical, the ethical, the environmental. All that stuff is going to be kind of potentially left by the wayside. The second thing is it just changes what Catherine, my co-author, and I have called the golden ratio. So if you think about in on out, as a leader, your ratio was what? 30, 60, 10, 30 in, 60 on, 10 out, 20, 70, 10, 20, 60, 20. But it was always the value of leadership was always on.
Yeah.
I think the value of leadership is becoming more out. And I think what that means fundamentally is there is a behavioral challenge to leadership which wasn't there before. Now it's not just about you've got to change what you do, is you've got to change how you do it. You've got to change about how you think of yourself as a leader. You've got to start thinking about, forget the levers of power that you had before about control, because those are all going to be machine enabled if we go into the 2-year future if you're Elon Musk, the 20-year future if you're anybody else. But there's a future coming where I think a lot of those levers are going to be removed. But the fundamental thing to realize is all you've got left is influence. And influence is leadership. I mean, I see it as a fundamentally we're going to see real leadership. Yeah. You're not going to be distracted by. You've just got left your ability to influence a system, and that's a challenge because we're not used to that. It's also a mind-boggling amount of work, and for people like me, it's fundamentally interesting. For people at the coalface who've got to make it work, it's challenging. But I think some of the challenges are huge. We saw this with COVID. We had an opportunity with COVID to start to rethink the way we work, and we've seen some of that happen. I think the opportunity has been missed to an extent to make fundamental changes. I think we just haven't got a choice with AI. I think it is coming because the benefits on are huge. So it will happen, no doubt about it. Whether we seize the opportunity to fundamentally address some of the challenges it raises for good or sometimes for bad, that I think that's up to a generation of leader who's emerging now.
It's funny. This is like continuing the conversation we started while
we were
together in London, as a matter of fact.
That's true.
I love how you related it back to your 3 circles, right?
Yeah.
Because that model we've been using with our finance teams, as you know, and teaching them that concept out of your book, Unleash the Leader.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant, and I think you're spot on. I think you're right. Gen AI is changing that notion, and it's coming so fast and so big in its scope that we have to pay attention more to the outside in perspective, and then relate it to how we're going to work on the business, et cetera. So I think that's some great advice from that perspective, as I knew you would be brilliant.
No, but I think it's fascinating to me because, I mean, take finance. The finance function has changed fundamentally over the years. But what digital promise was to say, look, we're going to release you. We're going to release you from controllers, as we like to call them in Europe. You suddenly it's not about control anymore. It's the value add. You're going to be at the top table. You're going to be advising about, what does it actually mean and so. Now, some of that has been delivered without a shadow of a doubt. But you think, well, if you remove even the stuff that we thought was value add, what have you got left? Actually, what you've got left is you're now about how do I influence a business? Actually, what does finance mean? Actually, it's a bit like in when Nemo takes the pill, in the Matrix, and suddenly sees the Matrix. And I always think of businesses, if you think about finance, like you take the pill, and if you look at cash is like the Matrix. It's the ultimate KPI, cross-functional KPI. It floats everywhere. And if you see that, you suddenly see, okay, finance is just a representation of the business.
Right.
So now it's about how do I influence the business? Now that I see the Matrix, I'm here to just influence and steward the future rather than just, try to relay the image.
Absolutely. It's a movement from what they call transactional finance accounting to strategic finance and accounting to business strategy, right?
And I think that's that last leap that has been so hard to make. I mean, I think the strategic finance is here, and you see plenty of examples of it. But moving it to the next level, I think, is just a fascinating journey.
Yeah.
And which AI should help us do if we seize the opportunity.
I hear you. Unbelievable. That's where we're dealing with that as we speak. So the other piece of this is talk about the role of collaboration in leadership. I think that's one of the things that you've always distinguished yourself with. And for me, being an association executive, it's part of our DNA. So how does collaboration and leadership in organizations play out from that standpoint?
Well, I think it's in many ways becoming even more critical. Now, when I started doing the research into leadership, it was kind of out of frustration because everybody talked about leadership, about collaboration. Sorry, everybody talked about collaboration. Everybody was saying, well, we need more collaboration. We need more collaboration. And rightly, a lot of people were saying, yeah, but the more collaboration we have, the slower things become, the more difficult they become, the more, weird and compromised they become, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the conclusions on collaboration was always, for me, actually, our issue is not that we do collaboration badly, is that we talk about it too much. And what I mean by that is, we don't differentiate. So every time an executive talks about collaboration, what they're really saying is you two should talk to each other. That's what they're fundamentally saying. But what we hear is we need to collaborate. So we start encroaching on people's patch. We start having conversation we don't really want but feel we should have. So it all becomes really kind of weird. And so one of the first things we did when we did the research on collaboration was to say, what is collaboration? Because actually, it's not consultation, because that's consultation. It's not coordination, because that's coordination. It's not. So what is it exactly? And what we realize is there is a real place for collaboration, but it's actually much rarer than what we think it is. And I think the sweet spot of collaboration is when we don't know what the goal is. I met an executive at Jaguar Motor who said to me, we cooperate when we collaborate when we design the car, we cooperate when we build it. And what he was saying is, we know what we've got to do and we know we have to do it together. That's cooperation. But when we collaborate is when we start to think about what happens next and we don't know. And that's when we need all the brains around the table. That's where it really adds value. Nobody can say it's a waste of time. Nobody can say I could have done it quicker myself, because they can't, because we don't know what we're after. And so if you think about what we've just discussed about AI and the challenges of moving to the next level of, from strategic finance to business finance, when we start to move out, we don't know what the future looks like. Yeah. We all have a view. I mean, some views are more informed than others. I don't have a view on the technology. I'm not versed enough in it. So I would need to get people who know what is possible to talk to about what's possible. I sure have a view about how it impacts human beings, because I know a bit about that. So I can contribute something to that. But none of us have the whole picture. We don't know. So I think for me, as we start to gravitate with AI, as we change business, collaboration is playing a real critical part, but we shouldn't mistake it for what it isn't. So we should be much clearer about what is it that we want out of collaboration? What are we collaborating on? And what do we need to be more effective on? And by the way, there's some amazing tools that can help us do consultation better, coordination better. So sure, there's some digital input in that. But in terms of us as leaders, our role is to say, how do a collaboration work? And the role of association. I mean, again, one business is not going to solve it. It's just not going to happen. Right. It's only by sitting down with peers that we can say, well, okay, what are the ethical implications of what we do? What are the political implications? What are the philosophical implications? What is the future? What are, how do we get the most out of this? And what do we want the most to be? So, for me, there's no option. I mean, you're just not going to succeed unless you collaborate. You can't do it on your own. It's just not possible. You can try to do it with people in your organization for sure. But I think it is a much broader conversation that needs to happen at sector level, across sectors, through professional networks, through associations. And if you remember, you mentioned, Unleash, and we talk about in and out. We also talk about networks of value, some in, some on, some out. And I think the networks out become much, much more critical, and they're all about collaboration.
So it's funny, you're describing literally to a T our Future Finance Leadership Advisory Group. We have about 50 global CFOs, mostly Fortune, probably 500 companies, who have been together since I joined, so 3 years almost. Wow. And that group gets together, literally, they've been together every other month for the last 3 years.
Wow.
All about trying to figure out what the future of finance is going to look like. So this lesson we're going to share with those guys, and obviously encourage them to get your book, because this is exactly what's coming out of this group.
Are you going to share with us what comes out of that group too? Because I think that is just fascinating. I mean, I there's a number of reports that are out. Stanford is doing a good work of collecting data as AI is being implemented. There's a lot of stuff which is going on in obviously academia, but I think in professional networks are so critical to seeing actually what is real here and how can it work. And I think that's just fascinating.
And AI is their number 2 objective, right? Number 2 issue coming out.
What's number one, Tom?
Digital transformation.
Yeah.
Number 3, need for new skills. So You get
in on out.
Yeah, there it
In
is.
on out.
Spot on.
No,
All right.
it's fascinating. It is fascinating.
All right, we got a couple more minutes, so let me keep
Okay.
moving here. So I love the closing quote in the book. It goes like this: "As for the future, your task as a leader is not to foresee it, but to enable it," which I think was the opening to leadership.
It was.
Talk to our viewers about why you chose this.
So it's a quote from Saint-Exupéry, and if you're a French person, you have to choose a quote from Saint-Exupéry at some stage in your career. We all grow up with Le Petit Prince, which is his kind of one of his books that we all read as children. I chose it because I think we talk a lot in business about vision, and we talk a lot about this idea that as a leader you need to have a vision. I think we're mistaken if we think that this vision has to be the truth. I think we're mistaken if this vision has to be reality. I think what the vision is an enabler to say, this is my stake in the ground. This is my North Star. This is my view of what the future could be. But our job as leaders is to make sure that we walk hand in hand and do the hard graft, of every day taking a step towards that vision, knowing that it will change. It's not the reality. This is not, it's not a GPS. We're not going to a final destination, which we know where it is. We don't. But our job is to enable the future to happen. And that means just keep on walking. When it gets hard, hold the hand of people, get them to hold you up when you're about to fall and you're getting tired, but actually have that resilience to say, we keep on going and we rely on each other to get to the right place. And that, to me, is an image which speaks to leadership, because leadership is tough, and I think it's hard. It is hard, and you've got to keep going, and you've got to keep motivating, and you've got to keep being motivated, and you can't be cynical. You've got to continue to be curious, and that's tough. It's tough for people when things get hard. So I think, just remember, your job is not to know. Your job is not to see when you're driving at 200 miles an hour on the motorway and then your windscreen wipers are broken and it's raining and it's pouring down. That's okay. That's life. You just have to keep going, but make sure you're holding on to people who can travel with you. That's what that quote says to me.
Love that. And all right, now, what's your favorite lesson in the book and why?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one because we were looking for the smallest possible number. We ended up with 20. We didn't want to take away stuff that was important, but we didn't want to put too much stuff on. So we tried to look for the minimum. So to say what's my favorite, they're all my favorite ones. I think probably for your audience, I should say it's follow the money, not the fashion, which is one of the rules about the importance of finance and finance as the language of business. It's probably not that one. I'll tell you the one. The one that comes to mind is the one that we call Line Up Your Screws. And you'll have to read the book to know why we call it Lined Up to Screws. But it's a rule which is really about understanding that your job as a leader, and the definition of leadership, is about creating the conditions for people to release their discretionary effort, for people to be positively involved with the goal. And what that speaks to is really, I think, probably the closest you'll ever get to a silver bullet in leadership, but the thing that will never hurt you but can always help you, which is this idea that you have to ask yourself, have I made people feel stronger and more capable? And if you can answer yes to that question, you've led, probably. Not have I bullied them into saying something, not pushing them, but just have I made them feel stronger? Not what I think I've done, but how they experience it. And that's what that rule speaks to, making people feel stronger and more capable.
I still remember that from 2010. You signed it in my book. It's actually, I think it's in that last final chapter or final paragraph or two.
Yeah.
So I think that one is huge, right? That is what a servant leader does.
Yeah.
And I think that is just so powerful. So I knew you would bring it home so well like you did.
I am so predictable, Tom.
You just got like 4 of Emmanuel's books downloaded on this episode, if you will, from this conversation, which I love and appreciate. So, Emmanuel, thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and trusting me to be
more opportunities to do more work together.
I hope we do.
So, for more with Emmanuel, visit EmmanuelGobillot.com, ANUELGOBILLOT.com. It will be in the show notes. You can listen to his podcast, The Word is Leadership, where each week he builds a leadership lesson starting from a word picked at random from the dictionary.
Yeah.
I've been hitting a couple of those. They're pretty cool. And then obviously look for his latest book. This is not a leadership book, 20 Rules for Success. You can get it on Amazon, or you can fly over to London and meet Emmanuel if you want, and he'll sign it for you.
I'm coming your way. I'm actually coming over to the US in a few weeks. So
you said that, so we have to see if there's any extra time. I know you're on a bit of holiday, but
I am.
If there's any extra time, let me know. We'd love to catch up. So
all right.
So for that, thank you for joining me.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Don't miss our other Future Ready Live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. And we'll see you then. Thanks again, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.